So you have this yellowish issue and you're wondering what to do or whether or not it's even an issue. Well, for most people, and especially the people who will probably comment that this isn't an issue, you're just making a bigger deal out of something that isn't anything. Well, you're right. For most people, this isn't an issue. For most people, this is fine, and you don't really notice it unless you're comparing it actively or you have just started using it. Then it's fairly noticeable, but after a few days of using nothing but just this screen, it's going to become less and less noticeable. But if you use it in tandem with other Apple devices, you will always notice it. You will always notice the slight orange tint on this, and it just looks kind of off. Whether or not that's a problem depends on what you do with your phone. Again, if you use it for creative work and color accuracy is important, then yes, it is important. This is very much an issue. But for the majority of people who own the iPhone 12, I'm assuming you're just using it to consume media and not create media necessarily past the occasional selfie and Instagram. That doesn't really matter too much. So yes, for most people it's not a problem, but it is a problem for the people that color accuracy is important too. So you can't say that that's not a problem. It absolutely is a problem for some people. Alright, welcome to the dark room. Today we're going to be taking a look at the infamous iPhone 12 yellow screen tinting problem that is present across the entire iPhone 12 lineup, from the mini to the regular one to the Pro to the Pro Max. They're all susceptible to this yellow screen tinting. Now, not every single device in the 12 lineup has this yellow screen. It's present in a good amount of them, but it's certainly not present across every single device. It's kind of a hit or miss. But if you're watching this video, it's probably because you noticed that your brand new iPhone 12 looked quite a bit warmer than you're used to, especially if you switch from a previous iPhone. And that's exactly what I noticed as well. And checking out online forums, you immediately realize that a lot of people are having this issue, while some people don't consider it an issue at all. So I'm going to be diving a little bit into that, but for now, let's just go ahead and check the settings. So you've probably come to your settings page and gone to your display and brightness to check that True Tone is off, because True Tone does give that orangey tint, and so does Night Shift. So if you have both of those off, then this is the true color of your phone's display. Now, for the sake of the brightness testing, I have it both at 100%. This is an iPhone 10 and this is an iPhone 12 Pro. Now, the 12 Pro is supposed to come in at several hundred nits higher in brightness compared to the iPhone 10. The iPhone 10 comes in at 650 nits, I believe, at peak brightness, and the iPhone 12 Pro comes in at 800 to 1200 peak brightness in nits for standard and HDR content respectively. So you're going to get quite a bit more brightness, at least that's what you're supposed to get. But honestly, looking at both of these screens, it's hard to tell. Sometimes I feel like the iPhone 10 is quite a bit brighter when it comes to colors, but when it comes to just pure backgrounds, the iPhone 12 Pro seems to be a little bit brighter. So I'm not sure why that's the case when it should be brighter all around. I don't have a luminance testing kit here for device displays, so I can't confirm the actual brightness of these screens, but in several cases I found that the iPhone 10 appeared to be brighter in person. So which display do you think is brighter? Let me know in the comments below. But today we're really here to look at the color variances. Now, if we take a look at the white background screen here, the white gray, this is supposed to be white and this is supposed to be gray. And on the iPhone 10, it seems to be quite a bit cooler in appearance, and on the iPhone 12 Pro, it seems to be quite a bit warmer. Now, as to which one is more accurate, it's hard to say without a professionally calibrated display to compare these two to, but I will say the iPhone 10 appears much more similar in comparison to my M1 Macbook Pro, which, as we know, is the latest MacBook design to come out. So that should be the most color calibrated display in Apple land, aside from the XDR Pro display. So the fact that my old iPhone 10 actually feels like it matches the color to the latest MacBook Pro available tells me that the iPhone 12 lineup is the odd one out here, because this did come before the MacBook Pro. So I've heard some people say that the warm tone is due to the screen adhesive or glue not having fully dried yet by the time these phones have been shipped out, and that's simply not the case, because these are OLED displays. These are not LCD panels that are glued on to each other. So there's no glue to dry. I know there was a previous iPhone model that did have that glue display, and after the glue dried, the tinting went away, but this is not the case for this particular model. Remember, these are OLED displays. I've also seen a bunch of quote-unquote solutions for fixing the color tint, one of which was to go into your accessibility settings and then go to your display and then go to color filters, and using the color slider you can adjust the image to make it look as close as you want to your previous display. And while this seems to work, this is as close as I could get it. I don't want to touch it anymore, but this is as close as I could get it. And while it does kind of sort of work, it also isn't the true color of your display, and it's not calibrating your display. You're merely putting a tint over it, which does affect the color of some other apps. Apps whose color schemes you might be used to will appear quite a bit different sometimes under the color filter. So I recommend you leave that off. Another downside of having the color filter on is you won't reach your maximum brightness with it on, because again, you're adding a filter over it. So turning it off is back to the natural display. I wouldn't consider that a true fix. That is a hacky roundabout that, sure, it could work in a pinch, but for a phone that costs this much, I don't think we should be required to go through these hoops just to make it look more accurate. And that brings me to the next topic, accuracy. How do you know which one is more color accurate? Well, the thing is, you can't. You can't tell unless you have a professionally calibrated display to compare it to. But what I can say is, again, the iPhone X does seem more consistent to all my other Apple devices that I've had in the past and present, whereas the iPhone 12 Pro looks quite a bit different. When I take pictures on the 12 Pro and I send it to all my devices via AirDrop, and I open all of them up, the 12 Pro looks the most different from the rest of them, which is concerning, because if you are someone that uses your phone to edit videos and pictures, you might very well be editing it through this slightly orange tint, which is an issue, because then when you get it to look perfect on this phone and you send it to the other devices, it's going to look over-edited. Take this for example. Have you ever accidentally tried editing a photo or color grading a video on your Mac in night shift mode before, where everything was orange? Well, I've done that a few times by mistake, and what happens then is when I get the colors to look just right through that orange night shift display, and I think it looks amazing, when I send it out to devices that don't have night shift, or when I just check back in the morning when night shift has turned off, then the colors look completely wacky. It is completely out of sync. Now, the iPhone 12 tinting issue is not as dramatic as a full-on orange night shift, but it's still there, and it's enough to make your images look different from what you think they actually look like. Now, this is mitigated by the fact that everybody's phone and screen is different, and people have different settings, so regardless of how you edit something, it's usually going to look different from how you edited it to look like in the first place. But as a creative professional, you want to get as close to consistency as you can, and this isn't it. So you have this yellowish issue, and you're wondering what to do or whether or not it's even an issue. Well, for most people, and especially the people who will probably comment that this isn't an issue, you're just making a bigger deal out of something that isn't anything, well, you're right. For most people, this isn't an issue. For most people, this is fine, and you don't really notice it unless you're comparing it actively, or you have just started using it. Then it's fairly noticeable, but after a few days of using nothing but just this screen, it's going to become less and less noticeable. But if you use it in tandem with other Apple devices, you will always notice it. You will always notice the slight orange tint on this, and it just looks kind of off. Whether or not that's a problem depends on what you do with your phone. Again, if you use it for creative work and color accuracy is important, then yes, it is important. This is very much an issue. But for the majority of people who own The iPhone 12, I'm assuming you're just using it to consume media and not create media necessarily past the occasional selfie and Instagram. That doesn't really matter too much. So yes, for most people it's not a problem, but it is a problem for the people that color accuracy is important too. So you can't say that that's not a problem. It absolutely is a problem for some people. So for those of us who do have a problem with it, what's the deal then? Well, this yellow tinting comes down to a few possibilities. The first, a faulty panel. Perhaps the manufacturing process was a little bit more haphazard this time around because of COVID and everything, so they were just rushing to get these out. So we have variances between the iPhone 12 panels because, again, this yellow tinting doesn't affect all of the iPhone 12s. Some iPhone 12s don't have it and some iPhone 12s do have it. So that is a pretty big inconsistency there. So it could very well be a manufacturing defect or a faulty panel. Or it could be a calibration issue, which is mostly software based, because Apple gives the factory a tolerance range to which they are supposed to calibrate the screens, and as long as it falls within that range, it's considered good and shipped out. So that would explain why some of the displays are warmer and some of the displays are cooler. Perhaps this year's range was extended a little bit more. Again, I don't know why, but perhaps that was the case. And if that's the case, then maybe the tinting could be fixed in a future software update, which Apple has alluded to. Now, Apple is aware of the yellow tinting problem. It has circulated in an internal memo found by Mac Rumors that Apple has told service providers to not service or change the screens on any of the 12 lineup because they are quote-unquote aware of the issue. So they didn't say what they were doing, whether or not they were working on a software fix or if they were just going to leave it as is, but they are aware of it. So that's kind of annoying for us who don't like the warmer tint. The third potential reason for the yellowish tinting is because Apple might have actually calibrated these screens on purpose to be a little bit warmer, as that is more color accurate than the cooler tones that we've gotten accustomed to with the older phones and the other devices. However, I find that kind of hard to believe because the MacBook Pro has always been heralded as being extremely color accurate, and once again, the MacBook Pro seems to match the color profile of the iPhone X, which is cooler than the 12 Pro. So if they really did calibrate the 12 Pro to be more color accurate, I'd find it hard to believe that their M1 Apple Silicon MacBooks, which came out after this, would use a previous color profile. They should have updated that too, but they didn't. So again, the iPhone 12 is the odd one out in terms of screen color calibration, which tells me it's probably not an intentional thing. Plus, if it was an intentional thing, then it should be across the board across all the iPhone 12s, not just some of them. It's really a hit or miss here. So, okay, you have the yellow iPhone tint going on. What do? Well, you can either, one, wait for the update to come along, and that might or might not ever come along, but perhaps it's a software issue and perhaps it will be fixed in a future update. But it's also equally likely that that would never happen. Your other option, if you're within the window of opportunity to do so, is to go and exchange it for another iPhone 12. I've seen a few people on the forums have successfully exchanged theirs for a version that doesn't have the bluish tint, so congratulations to those people. But I've also seen some people exchange their iPhone 12 for another one only to get the exact same yellow tinting problem, or sometimes even worse yellow tinting problem. So it could get better or stay the same or get worse. You're really rolling the dice here. So whether or not you want to do that, that's up to you, but it's not a guaranteed way to fix this. And I've heard of some people exchanging it 3, 4, 5 times just to try and find a right one and still not getting a right one. So it's a fairly common issue, this yellow tinting, but it's certainly not on every device. So those are basically your options. You either hang on to it and cross your fingers and hope, or you exchange and exchange and exchange and exchange and also cross your fingers and hope. Neither of those are great propositions, and kind of disappointing that Apple hasn't made an official comment on this. If they would just come out and say, yes, we intentionally made it warmer this time around, I'm sure that would put a lot of people at ease. But as of now, we don't know whether or not it's a defect or if it was intentional, and if it was intentional, why it doesn't apply to all of the iPhone 12 lineup and only some of them. It seems kind of random. So yeah, if you decide you want to try and fix this yourself, you can always try that tint color filter, but again, it's not necessarily a true fix. So I'll show you what it is here. I've set up a hotkey for it, so color filter on. And right now, it looks quite a bit closer, but it's still different, but it's as close as I could get it. I'm sure the camera is picking this up way differently from my eyes, but to my eyes, these look more similar than they were before. And here's what the natural one looks like. It's quite a bit yellower, so you can always go into the accessibility setting and do that. Or I've seen some people suggest going and turning True Tone on and off a bunch of times within the span of a couple of minutes. And that's supposed to calibrate the True Tone sensor and somehow reset the natural look of it. I don't think it really works, but somebody has found luck in this method. Another method that I saw was to go into your display and brightness, into your accessibilities, display, turn on and off auto brightness, turn it off, and then max out the brightness. But again, I don't think this has actually done anything. So aside from the color tint roundabout, there doesn't seem to be an effective and consistent method of fixing this yellowish tint. And it remains to be seen if this is truly a more color accurate or superior display, or if it's really just an issue with the hardware or the software side of things. We won't know until later on. So what I'm going to try to do is get it exchanged tomorrow, and hopefully I get a better screen and not a worse screen, because if I do, I'm going to go crazy. So I will update you guys in a future video, and hopefully this has helped some of you guys out, because I know this was an issue that I was dealing with and checking the forums almost every other day, trying to find a solution. And all I really saw were people not knowing what to do and people saying that it wasn't an issue. And obviously, if it's not an issue for you, I don't know why you're watching this video. This is for people who have an issue with this. So yeah. On a side note, I compared this iPhone 12 Pro to my friend's Samsung Galaxy something, I forgot what number it was, and I found the panels to be remarkably similar. The Samsung tended to show warmer tones just like the iPhone 12 Pro over here, and looking at the same pictures together looked very similar, whereas they do look very different compared between these two. So yeah, that's all I have to say about these for now. Hopefully this helped those of you who were wondering about this issue, and if it did, go ahead and give me a thumbs up and maybe even subscribe if you are so inclined to. Alright, I'll see you in the next video. So for those of you wondering how my slightly yellow tinted iPhone 12 Pro compared to the iPhone 12 models in the Apple stores, I actually went to one located in Short Pump here in Virginia, and I compared my phone to a bunch of the floor models, and I found that about half of them have the yellow tintish issue while the other half didn't. So again, very inconsistent. And I've seen some people on the forum say that all the display models at their local Apple store has the same yellow tint, and some people say that all the display models there don't have the yellow tint. So I just happen to have one that has a mix of both. Go figure.